At precisely 0900 hours on the morning of September 27, 1942, Lieutenant Colonel William J. Whaling stood solemnly at the very edge of Henderson Field on the embattled island of Guadalcanal, his eyes fixed intently on a grim procession unfolding before him. 4 weary Marines, their faces etched with exhaustion and sorrow, carefully carried a makeshift stretcher toward the nearby aid station, navigating the rough terrain with deliberate steps to avoid jarring the lifeless form it bore. The young man on the stretcher was just 22 years old, a fresh-faced private on his 3rd patrol in as many weeks. He had been struck down mercilessly before his squad even located the elusive Japanese position hidden deep within the suffocating jungle. Tragically, he never had a chance to fire a single shot in defense. Behind this first stretcher came 3 more, each bearing the weight of another fallen comrade, their bodies limp and bloodied from the morning's deadly encounter. The impenetrable jungle had claimed yet another patrol that fateful dawn, swallowing a 7-man team whole in its green abyss. Only 4 survivors had staggered back to base, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed, and barely escaped. The Japanese forces dominated the jungle with an almost supernatural prowess, moving like ethereal shadows through the dense undergrowth, unseen and unheard, until it was far too late for their victims. 2 grueling months into the Guadalcanal campaign, a pivotal and brutal struggle in the Solomon Islands that marked the first major Allied land offensive against the Empire of Japan in the Pacific theater of World War II, the Marine patrols were repeatedly walking straight into ambushes they could never anticipate or counter effectively. In just the past 3 weeks alone, a staggering 17 patrols had been completely wiped out, their members cut down in sudden bursts of gunfire or silent bayonet thrusts from concealed enemies. The Japanese soldiers navigated the thick vegetation with the ease of ghosts, blending seamlessly into the foliage, vines and shadows that made up the island's unforgiving landscape. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marines, trained primarily for open-field frontal assaults and amphibious landings as per pre-war doctrines, found themselves utterly blind in this environment. They couldn't spot an enemy soldier, even if he was lurking just 10 feet away, camouflaged by the riot of greenery and the dim, filtered light that barely penetrated the canopy overhead. Enemy snipers, perched high in trees or hidden in cleverly constructed spider holes, methodically picked off Marine officers with chilling precision, disrupting command structures and sowing chaos among the ranks. Machine gun nests remained invisible until an entire squad had unwittingly passed by, only to be raked with devastating fire from behind, turning retreat into a deadly gauntlet. Whaling, a seasoned veteran with years of experience, recognized this deadly pattern all too well. It was a recipe for annihilation, one that would inexorably bleed the Marines dry if left unchecked. The 1st Marine Division, under the overall command of Major General Alexander A. Vandergrift, had already suffered grievous losses. Over 400 men killed or wounded by Japanese ambushes in September alone, a toll that included not just infantry but also vital support personnel, standard infantry tactics honed in the open fields of training grounds back in the States or drawn from experiences in World War I, simply did not translate to this hellish jungle warfare. The Marines desperately needed a new approach, something innovative and unconventional that the Japanese would never see coming, something that could turn the hunters into the hunted just 2 days prior, on September 25th. Whaling had been unexpectedly relieved of his command as the executive officer of the 5th Marine Regiment. This demotion wasn't due to any failure in combat, far from it. Whaling's battlefield acumen was unquestioned. Rather, it stemmed from irreconcilable personality conflicts with his commanding officer, a not uncommon occurrence in the high-stakes pressure cooker of wartime leadership. In most cases, an officer in such a position would have been rotated back to the United States for reassignment or even administrative duties, far removed from the front lines. But fate intervened in the form of Colonel Gerald C. Thomas, the Divisional Chief of Staff, and a man with a keen eye for talent. Thomas knew Whaling's sterling reputation intimately. A decorated World War I veteran who had earned the Silver Star for gallantry at the Battle of San Miguel in 1918. An expert marksman who had represented the United States in the 1924 Paris Olympics as part of the shooting team. And above all, a master of fieldcraft, the art of survival, navigation, and combat in rugged terrains. Most crucially, Whaling possessed an unparalleled understanding of how to operate effectively in hostile environments, skills honed through years of service, including jungle patrols in Nicaragua during the Banana Wars of the 1920s and 1930s. Recognizing that Whaling's expertise was too valuable to waste, Thomas made the unorthodox decision to keep him on Guadalcanal. He assigned Whaling a special task: to deeply analyze their ongoing jungle problem and devise solutions to the relentless ambush tactics plaguing the division. Whaling embraced this opportunity with characteristic determination, spending the next 3 days observing patrols as they departed from Henderson Field, the vital airstrip that was the linchpin of Allied control on the island, and meticulously counting how many men returned, often bloodied or not at all. The mathematics he calculated were stark and brutal. At the current attrition rate, with ambushes claiming lives at an unsustainable pace, the 1st Marine Division would exhaust its supply of able-bodied infantrymen long before the Japanese could be dislodged from their jungle strongholds or run out of the endless cover provided by Guadalcanal's vast, untamed wilderness. Whaling concluded that what they needed were specialized warriors, men who could hunt the hunters, reversing the deadly dynamic that favored the enemy. These elite operators would need to embody qualities rarely emphasized in standard marine training: mastery of stalking techniques to approach undetected, the ability to read terrain like a map etched in nature's own hand, silent movement through foliage that betrayed no presence, and the cold precision to kill without ever being seen or heard. On September 29th, armed with this vision, Whaling strode purposefully into General Vandergrift's command tent, a makeshift structure of canvas and palm fronds amid the constant threat of Japanese artillery and air raids. There, he presented his bold proposal: to organize a dedicated scout sniper unit, comprising 100 hand-picked volunteers from across the division. These men would be selected based on specific criteria: pre-war hunting backgrounds from rural America, experience as outdoorsmen accustomed to wilderness survival, and proven skills as marksmen who could hit targets with deadly accuracy under duress. They would undergo intensive training in reconnaissance, ambush countermeasures, and guerrilla tactics, then deploy in small, agile teams deep into the jungle. Their primary roles: to gather critical intelligence on enemy positions, eliminate high-value targets like officers and snipers, and clear paths for regular patrols, thereby reducing the ambush risks that had decimated so many units. General Vandergrift, a visionary leader himself who had studied historical precedents for unconventional warfare, approved the plan without hesitation. Vandergrift had long admired the tactics of Lieutenant Colonel Robert Rogers and his Rangers during the French and Indian War of the 1750s, small mobile units that operated independently behind enemy lines, striking with surprise and vanishing into the wilderness. This concept resonated perfectly with the desperate, resource-strained situation on Guadalcanal, where traditional large-scale assaults were proving costly and ineffective against a dug-in, jungle-savvy foe. With the green light secured, Whaling was given a tight deadline: just 1 week to identify, recruit, and begin training his men. Time was of the essence, as Japanese reinforcements were pouring onto the island, via nocturnal convoys dubbed the Tokyo Express, and the Marines' hold on Henderson Field grew more precarious by the day. If you're eager to delve deeper into how whaling forged this groundbreaking unit, the deadliest force to emerge in the Pacific theater, consider showing your support by hitting that like button. It genuinely helps amplify these overlooked tales from history, ensuring they reach a wider audience. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to stay updated on more such narratives. Now, returning to Whaling's story. That very night, under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp in his tent, Whaling began poring over stacks of service records, sifting through the personnel files of thousands of Marines on the island. He searched for telltale markers that indicated potential. Expert rifle qualifications from boot camp marksmanship tests, rural upbringings in places like the Appalachian Mountains or the vast plains of the Midwest where hunting was a way of life, documented experience with firearms from civilian pursuits like deer stalking or competitive shooting, and even disciplinary records that hinted at independence rather than unreliability. He sought out men who had gotten into trouble for questioning rigid orders, but always accomplished their missions, rebels with a cause, not cowards or malcontents. By October 1st, after exhaustive review, Whaling had compiled a list of 43 promising candidates drawn from various regiments and backgrounds, united by their potential to excel in this new form of warfare. He summoned them to a dawn briefing at 0600 on October 2nd, gathering them in a cleared area near the airfield, where the constant drone of C-47 transport planes and P-400 fighters provided a backdrop of urgency. Standing before them in his weathered utilities, Whaling laid out the truth with unflinching honesty. The assignment was entirely voluntary, with no shame in opting out. He painted a vivid picture of the risks. The casualty rate for reconnaissance work hovered above 50% based on recent patrols. They would operate in minuscule teams of 2 or 3, venturing for days behind Japanese lines, cut off from supply lines and reinforcements. If captured or pinned down, there would be no heroic rescue missions. Extraction was impossible without risking even more lives. Despite this sobering warning, 41 men stepped forward immediately, their faces set with determination. Only 2 chose to walk away, perhaps sensing the gravity or preferring the relative safety of conventional infantry roles. Whaling surveyed the volunteers standing resolute before him, noting their youth. Most were 20 years old or younger, with half having seen less than 2 months of actual combat since landing on Guadalcanal in August. Yet, they possessed an intangible quality that set them apart from the rank-and-file infantry, an innate desire to hunt, to pursue and outmaneuver prey in the wild. This primal instinct, combined with Whaling's impending training regimen, was about to transform them into the most feared adversaries the Japanese Imperial Army would encounter in the Pacific War. His innovative program would not only save countless Marine lives on Guadalcanal, but also establish a template for future special operations. Indeed, 2 years later, in 1944, another enterprising Marine officer would draw directly from Whaling's methods to assemble an even more infamous unit, incorporating one shocking and unconventional requirement in his recruitment process, a criterion that would stun the entire Marine Corps and forge a legend enduring for over 80 years. Training commenced without delay on October 3rd in a secluded jungle sector west of Henderson Field, far from prying eyes and potential Japanese scouts. No official manuals existed for what Whaling was pioneering. The Marine Corps had disbanded its rudimentary scout sniper program after World War I, deeming it unnecessary in the interwar period of mechanized warfare doctrines. Everything Whaling imparted stemmed from his own hard-won experience, 24 years in the Corps, including brutal jungle patrols in Nicaragua against Sandinista rebels, the muddy trenches of France in 1918, where he learned that invisibility often trumped bravery for survival, and countless hours on shooting ranges, perfecting marksmanship under adverse conditions. The inaugural lesson focused on the essence of stealth, silence in movement. Whaling led his volunteers into the thick jungle and issued a simple challenge: walk 100 yards without producing a single audible noise that could alert an enemy. Predictably, every man failed on the first attempt. Equipment rattled. Against bodies, boots snapped dry branches underfoot, canteens clinked metallically against rifle slings. The jungle, with its echoing acoustics and sensitive understory, amplified even the slightest disturbance, turning minor sounds into betrayals. Undeterred, Whaling made them repeat the exercise relentlessly, methodically eliminating sources of noise. They taped down loose metal parts on their gear with adhesive from medical kits, wrapped soft cloth strips around canteen, hooks and buckles, and switched to soft-soled boots, or even went barefoot when feasible, instead of the standard-issue heavy leather footwear that crunched loudly on leaves and twigs. After 3 intensive days of trial and error, half the men could traverse dense vegetation without alerting hypothetical Japanese positions as far as 200 yards away, their steps as light as falling rain. This foundational skill was crucial, as historical accounts from Guadalcanal emphasize how Japanese forces relied on auditory cues to detect approaching patrols, often ambushing based on the rustle of leaves or the clatter of gear. Marksmanship training followed, building on the men's existing proficiency, but adapting it to the realities of jungle combat. Most Marines could reliably hit static targets at 300 yards on a controlled rifle range, but such environments bore no resemblance to Guadalcanal's chaos. Gusting winds whipping through the canopy, torrential rains turning sights foggy and barrels slippery, and targets that not only moved, but fired back with lethal intent. Whaling taught advanced techniques drawn from his Olympic-level expertise, estimating distances by analyzing terrain features like the size of trees or the slope of hillsides, gauging wind direction and speed by observing how vegetation swayed or leaves fluttered, and compensating for the island's high humidity, which could subtly alter bullet trajectories by affecting air density and powder burn rates. He drilled them in firing from awkward real-world positions, uphill shots where gravity pulled bullets low, downhill where they flew high, prone in sticky mud that caked rifles, or crouched behind scant cover like fallen logs that barely concealed a man's silhouette.